Hey, friends and family, this is William with Sharpesoft. Today, we're doing something for the Hope for Hard Hats. You know that the suicide in the construction industry is a massively struggling place, and I have a great opportunity to be on with Carole. Carole, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Carole Reitsma. I have been married for 47 years. My husband says it's been like 47 minutes
Hmm.
underwater, and that has not been a pretty picture much of the time. It is now. I have one son who's 38. I have been a marriage and family therapist for 25 plus years. Before that, I was an RN working intensive care. And before that, I grew up in a very dysfunctional, very, very damaged home. And I guess really what I want to tell you the most about in my testimony is when my son was about 4, I started really dealing with the awful life I lived as a child. And we had a loaded shotgun in the closet.
Hmm.
And I got to the point in trying to deal with all this and the pain and sorrow of it that my only hope was that loaded shotgun.
Hmm.
That I believed that if the pain got too great, I'd take my parents out first,
Hmm.
and then I would shoot myself. And
Hmm.
um, I had intervention. My husband and my sister recognized that things were not going good and said, "Hey, this is not okay." I was furious. I was ticked off. I did not want them stopping the only hope I had, which was in dying to get rid of this pain. And yet, I spent a good 10 plus days in a facility realizing that this was not what the
Hmm.
Lord wanted for me. It was not, it was a lie from the enemy, and that I would never have so much pain that Jesus could not help me with it.
Hmm.
And
Amen.
I've never felt that way again. But
Hmm.
I hear William told me about the statistics of suicide, and my heart just really hurts because that means there's a lot of pain and sadness there that people are only finding hope in dying.
Hmm. Yeah, Carole, thank you for sharing that. We talked briefly before we started this about the suicide rates in the construction industry, and so what we're doing is this hope for hard hats. This idea that we work in a very tough industry. There's a lot of money pressure. There's a lot of time constraints. But even as what you're saying, life is tough. It may not even be just the construction industry, and so there's this lack of hope that we're seeing. So Carole, I would love to, as we continue this on, I'd love to dig more into that, what that story looks like and what that hope of Jesus, because that's really what the hope is. This concept, just so we're clear, I'm not trying to hide anything, not trying to sugarcoat anything. The hope for hard hats is Jesus. I believe that that's a true relationship that saves us into an eternal life of peace and joy and happiness. And it's really the peace in the storms, Carole, right? Like you've been in there and I've been there, and
Yes.
I haven't always lived that life before. So jumping right in, at that time when hope started to fade, right? You mentioned something, past hurt. So as kind of now, not in your story, but just kind of now your history as a marriage family therapist, what you're getting to see, how often do you see hurt being the root of our current behaviors and or our current situations?
Oh, I think hurt and pain and emotional pain and the lack of a way of learning how to deal with it
Hmm.
is at the root of all of this. It's so funny because we aren't taught how to have relationships.
Hmm.
We aren't taught what it takes to be people who can be vulnerable and open, and we believe that's going to happen with our spouse or with our girlfriend or boyfriend or whoever. And yet, it has to happen really first with us and God, and us and ourselves. If we don't have that ability to handle our own truth, our own vulnerability, we can't show it to anybody. And
Mm.
that isolation and loneliness starts creating a place where hurt builds. We are meant to resolve hurt. We're meant to resolve pain. If we, emotions are not meant to stay in the state they're in, they're to be metabolized. If I'm really angry at you, Will, I need to tell you that, and I need to tell it to you in a way that you can hear it. And guess what happens to my anger? It metabolizes into something else, something a lot more productive. Maybe we come up with a solution. Maybe I don't feel so angry. Maybe I figure out that my anger was unjustified. But what happens is that anger, that emotion gets metabolized. If I keep it in, that anger stays just as fresh as the
Mm.
moment it starts. And then we get resentment, which resentment is just piling anger upon anger, or pain upon pain. And so the whole idea here is, how do I, in relationship, talk out my emotions so they metabolize and I stay clean and free? And I think that we get to a place of hopelessness when all of that's piled on too fast, too much, or over years we've never gotten to resolve it.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
that's what
Carole, as you're saying that, right? What does it go to for me as you and I in truth, transparency, you and I are interacting because of those same struggles in my own personal life that is impacting my wife, and my wife is going through whatever her situations are. But as you and I are in this situation, this is a real life conversation for me and Carole. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to have the dialogue, because Carole, you have such an immense knowledge and a way to, I like that idea of just metabolizing that, right? Like we think that emotion is an okay emotion, but the reality is it's not. It's a byproduct of something hurt, and we may not even understand or correspond the hurt. So you said something earlier on about your situation, that it was the shotgun first to your parents and then to you. So how much of our, and again, I think the majority of people we're going to be talking to are probably men, although there is a decent percentage of women in the construction industry as well. How many, rough guess, of the people that you helped over the years and the decades at this point have an unresolved problem with a parent, father or mother? What is that catalyst for the hurt and the pain that we're experiencing today?
Boy, I think close to 100%.
Mm.
That because we are, because if you think about it, I mean, I don't see people who are emotionally healthy who, have learned from their parents how to do this. I believe that the percentages of people who are truly emotionally healthy from childhood is pretty minimum. That
Mm.
we learn out of our own pain and our own need, we learn how to be emotionally healthy. And when I say emotionally healthy, that means that I metabolize in healthy ways that don't ruin, I don't, totally slam my husband in being angry, but I metabolize in ways that keep me in a clean state with him, and he does the same. And so there's a lot that has to do with, if I've got why I wanted to kill my parents first is because they were tremendous. I mean, my dad was in the KKK, so you can imagine what my life was like. And so, but I really wanted
Well,
to. Uh,
Carole, I had my seatbelt on while we were parking. I didn't realize we were going to go down in that way. That we're into some rough territory already. So I'm sitting in a parked car with a seatbelt about that statement right there. So there's probably a whole other topic on that right there, right? Thank you for sharing.
yeah. See, you're surprised, aren't you surprised? Yeah. But anyway, I had such hate, such fear. I feared for my little boy who was 4 at the time. I feared him being around my parents. I had such hate for them. And I had never had any kind of way of metabolizing anything, that I
Mm.
really believe the only way to solve this was to get rid of them
Mm.
and then get rid of me. And that was my hope. And so many times, you know what, we do this. Okay, we do this with our marriages. I do this thing called the resurrected marriage, because my marriage has died 1,000 times and been resurrected 1,001. And the reality is, it's not that we never have problems with our marriage. What we typically do in this country, 50+% of the time, is when we get hopeless, or we get to the point of hopeless, then we dump that marriage, shotgun, shoot it, and get another, thinking that's going to work. Instead of really realizing that the hope is in, if you find a person who wants to be emotionally healthy also, you are so blessed. And the hope is in being able to resolve and resurrect what's wrong. And so, yeah, so anyway, that's kind of off the subject, but I believe that really this idea of hopelessness is really the idea from the enemy. I believe that when the enemy took Jesus in the wilderness up to the mountain top and said, jump off, I believe it was his temptation to kill. It was trying to tempt Jesus to kill himself, because Jesus was tempted in ways like we are. And
yeah, Carole,
and certainly,
that's such a. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. You know, by now I'm an interrupter and talking over and doing this kind of stuff. My mind works in those ways, and I apologize. But even as you say that, right, that temptation to be hopeless almost, right, that then gets by our family dynamic. And you said something a little while ago. How often do you think that people, and I think men especially, do a decent job of stuffing that down, never really dealing with it, but putting on the mask that they are okay? And I think the statistics tell us as men, if we're, I'm just going to, as men right now, we're not okay. There's 68% of men that are struggling with porn addictions. There's some, probably 52% in every profession, not just construction, that are struggling with some sort of alcohol or drug addiction. Marriages are at a 57% failure rate, whether you're Christian or non-Christian. So we can tell ourselves that we're okay, but we're lying to ourselves and not wanting to deal with the problem. So are you seeing that as a theme, that as you counsel couples, you talk to people, that we don't really want to deal with the problem?
Huge, huge, because men are not taught to have anything below their neck. The only two okay emotions for men is anger and sex equals love. And so that's the only two things that men are allowed to have. And this ability to understand their heart, to understand their emotions, they are taught to stuff. In fact, you know, this is really interesting. Men who, as little boys in school, are, you know, if you've ever had a teacher grab you by the chin and say, look me in the eye, little girls easily can do that. They're up there raising their hand, wanting to be the teacher's pet. Little boys, if you make them stare you in the eye, you hyperactivate a place in their brain that either wants to act out and enrage or run. And so little boys are taught to either stuff it all or act out in rage, simply because female teachers have not realized that little boys are listening, they're understanding, they're hearing you, they need to look away. They need to look away. And female teachers have never been taught that. So little boys, besides at home, are taught to stuff all this and then blow up, become really rage filled and just stay blown up all the time. And that's a simple way that we don't even understand the male brain.
Well, and I think when you just say that, Carole, this idea of rage and anger, right? It manifests itself in different ways. That it could be road rage, driving on the road and somebody cuts us off. I think we're as you're saying that, it's just kind of, we're wired to have this idea of respect, and we don't have probably a healthy understanding of respect. We don't get that for sure. But when we feel this idea of being disrespected with that anger of rage or fleeting, right? If we're talking about guys in the construction industry, how many guys leave their job because a boss says something to them and they're like, that's it, I'm out. Now they have the stress of the money, the stress that the wife or, the fiance is like, hey, we can't pay our bills. But internally, the guy feels disrespected and can't walk through that disrespect in some sort of a way of Carole, you and I are talking. Hey, Carole, you just said this, and that felt very disrespectful to me. And being okay with expressing that feeling without whatever the lashback was in our lives. It could have been, it could have been punishment. It could have been we get in trouble, but we are conditioned to not deal with that type of stuff, and it's plaguing us as men. I'm 48 years old. I see men. I talk about marriages. We're struggling in our marriage. Life is up and down. It has all these kind of things, but it's coming down to those root things I never got taught. I got taught how to hit a baseball. I got taught how to run 40-yard dashes and tackle people. I got taught how to do math. I'm not a very good speller. They probably were trying to teach me, but I didn't do that well. But we never had a life class in conflict resolution. And it really starts out in our parental element, right? Where we don't have a voice, or we have to yell and scream to be able to have that voice heard. And now we're seeing that generation side of this, of suicide rates, divorce rates, people saying that they don't want to get married, in those types of things. So in your assessment, Carole, if it's the family unit, and not to put it that it's good or bad, let's just use healthy and not healthy. If it was not healthy, what are some things that you've seen for people to walk through, maybe on their own, give them a little bit of a couple minute exercise that they can do? I have a faith in Jesus. You have a faith in Jesus. I would hope that everybody who's struggling has a faith in Jesus, as well as if things are going well. That's the ultimate hope. But if it's not going, hey, you got to go to Jesus, what's kind of the on ramp to one, maybe self reflect? And then what's the next step if you're feeling that hopeless, this lack of hope bubble that we're seeing that the statistics are proving to us?
Yeah. Find somebody safe.
Mm.
Being safe means that the person you're going to talk to is not going to get all hurt and insulted and butthurt about it and have their own opinion and blah, 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 but instead can just hear your pain. That takes tremendous courage, which men have tremendous courage. They are born that way, and it gets like sucked out of them, especially by authoritarian parents who, you're to be seen, not heard, and shut up
Mm.
and don't do that or whatever. But really, it's really find someone who's safe. Now, I will tell you this: if you're feeling all this, the best thing you can do is start journaling it. Just start writing. Be your own safe person. By the way, the other thing is Jesus is always safe. I don't know if you've
Mm.
seen the film The Chosen. There's different opinions about that, but if you just look at this guy and how safe he is, how he is okay. You know what? Just because you say this doesn't mean it's reflecting on him. Just because you are feeling this way, he knows you can get to a different feeling state. But the first thing is be okay with you saying it. And maybe that means writing it out.
Mm.
Prayer, by the way, is an awesome way to say it. Just say it out loud. And it's always safe to pray. And so, the really realize that you've got to get this out.
So,
Men,
Carole, just for clarity on that, is that like I have a problem with my dad? Is that what you're just trying to communicate? Like, get that into a point where you're getting in the rhythm of it, acknowledging that there is some sort of hurt, pain, fear, anxiety in that? Is that what we're looking for at that point?
yes. And even, you know what, if you just start out and say, I am so mad at Susie. She is such a jerk. I can't believe she did this, blah, blah, blah. I mean, just be raw. Okay. Pretty soon you'll go, wow, Susie reminds me of my dad. My dad
Mm.
did blah, 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 right? If you write it out, there's two things that happen. When you are in enormous pain, you're down here in your limbic system, which is fight or flight. It is only there to keep you safe and to get you away from even pain. Okay, so your frontal lobes are turned off. Your frontal lobes are the place where reasoning and thought, forethought, planning, love all happens. That's why
Mm.
the gun, because I was down here the shotgun sounded reasonable because it wasn't up here. If you are writing as you are emoting, you are connecting both parts of your brain. And in that connection, you'll go, wow, you know what? Susie really is 10% of my problem. My dad is 90% of my problem.
Mm.
You know, and you're not just dumping it all on Susie. And you're realizing, you know, that wasn't okay for my dad to treat me that way. You're starting to metabolize this. Okay.
Mm.
And so,
and, and
and
that's
so,
and that's anti the stuffing, right, Carole? So that's doing something different than the stuffing, which we've been taught our entire life. So just simply jotting something down like that, taking the piece of paper, crumpling it up so nobody else can see it, but that starts that
right,
process of starting to remove maybe the lid that most men had.
yes,
Yeah, that's such a good
yes,
practical way to just walk through that.
yeah, absolutely. You know, it's funny because for years I had a friend who we agreed if one of us died, the other one would go straight to the house and burn all the journals, you know, because you don't need anybody else to read all that. You know, and so, and the other thing is, I also would walk. Walking is this kind of alternative movement of, of of helping your frontal lobe talk to your limbic system, which is another thing we could get into is EMDR. But walking also helps process. So, I mean, I would take the dog, and the dog's like, I mean, like having to keep up as I am going down the road. I'm talking to the Lord. I'm talking to myself. I am just getting this out. You need to really take the energy of it out. It's
Mm.
supposed to stay in there. That energy causes heart attacks, strokes, all kinds of problems. And so you need to release the energy, especially men.
Yeah, Carole. I mean, just I think just even for myself in hearing that, I am not a good journaler, but I realize that when I do write some things down, there is it allows me to reprocess it and go, oh, okay, I want to do this, or let me look at that. I do love to walk. I do schedule calls throughout the week in a walk, and so that's definitely I love those two simple applications, right? Write it down and then start to walk and then yell it yell it while you're walking. Nobody's going to hear it. And I think most men, what is very interesting, and God affords me the opportunity to talk to quite a few men in my week, as well as I'm a man who struggles. I think it's very interesting that even in the alone time, we don't want to deal with those types of things. We want to be in a place where it's almost like like I call it the ostrich syndrome, right? I want to put my head in the sand. I just don't want to deal with it. And today's going to be a better day because somehow I'm strong enough. I'm smart enough. I've read another book. I'm going to get past this. But it always seems to come up. That trash in our life never gets dealt with. And we're always like, something doesn't smell right and something doesn't feel right. And so when you look at this as a long-term curve, Carole, um, for those that have
Mhm.
struggled with mental health and those of us that have struggled with that lack of hope, where was where's the pivotal point? Is it when people start to communicate, to verbalize that then they could really understand their help, or is there another process that helps them through that situation?
You mean the pivotal point of hopelessness? Is that what you
The
mean?
pivotal
Where's
point
that pivotal
of the
point?
person who's shifting from hopelessness to hope. Is it just really realizing that you're in that space and maybe just going like, hey, Carole, I need help.
Yeah, right. I'll tell you what, the pivotal point is when you find out that really the metabolism brings peace.
Mm,
There's a place where, oh, you know, and a lot of times, if you're hopeless and you're to the point of hopeless, you really do need professional help. You do need somebody who is safe to start talking this through. And the other thing about peace is this, you know, there's this place where, okay, I was just heard and understood. Oh, I get why that's happening. There's this place where a peace comes over us in that metabolism. Just it's just for maybe a minute or so or whatever, but it does start to believe this. You know, Jesus said, "My peace I give you, not as
Mm,
the world knows peace." That kind of peace is the ability to look above the chaos.
mm,
So at the point where I can understand, oh, this chaos inside me, or this chaos I'm feeling, is really a lot about my dad and how he treated me, or really a lot about how insulted I get when, this woman says something to me because I was insulted my whole life because I couldn't look the lady in the eye, or whatever, where you start to find a wholeness in yourself that is greater than these little chaotic parts.
mm.
And that brings hope.
And First Peter 5:7 says, "Cast your cares on him being Jesus, because Jesus cares." And yeah, that idea of having somebody, Carole, no matter what else is going on, that will care through the thick and the thin, has been an incredible life-changing situation in my life since 2015. So if you had a couple minutes of closing thought based on them, we're kind of all over the map. I just love the way that the conversation worked itself out. What would be advice, suggestion? Hopefully we get a chance, Carole, to have another conversation. So you and the community, whether you're on the internet, whether you see this on YouTube or LinkedIn and you have some questions, please personally reach out. If need be, I'll get you in contact with Carole. But we want to have this is going to be a dialogue for the Hope for the Hard Hats, right? We know what's going on. We know that there's people struggling. Um, Painting the picture, I'm a CEO of a company. I run a company. From the outside, things may seem like they're great, but they're not always great. And I believe that I'm struggling with some of these things 9 years into my faith that I didn't really deal with 9 or 10 years ago, or 30 years ago for that matter, Carole. And so I am a strong willed person. I don't like to know when I'm failing, but I also love the fact that Christ gives me the opportunity to be better, puts me in contact with amazing people like yourself that says, yeah, we could work through this, right? You're not a bad person because this is happening. How would you kind of sum up this idea of maybe even getting help? I think a lot of times people have a hard time going and asking for help.
Boy, no, that's so true. And I would say, number one, to be in the construction industry is like amazing. I mean, it gives me the chills because I could never do what you guys do. It's amazing, the strength, the
Mm,
courage, the forethought, the ability you put together to do construction. And all of that is what you use to get healthy. You use your courage, you use your strength, you use your
mm,
conviction. Even if it's that, ultimately what happened to me was I couldn't imagine leaving my 4-year-old little boy. And that's what threw me out of immediately wanting to kill myself before I could find hope. But the idea that there are people who want you and need what you have, and you lose nothing by saying, I need help, any more than you lose your construction skills if you ask somebody to hand you a hammer. You lose
such a good
nothing.
point. Such a good
You,
point.
you, you know what? Don't sit there wanting a hammer and thinking that somehow you're weak if you have to ask somebody to hand you the hammer. Go for it. You deserve and you keep all of the good of you, all the strength and the understanding and the wisdom and the courage and the construction stuff you have. You keep all of that. You don't lose any of that.
Mm.
Ask for the hammer.
And Carole, even on that point, what if we're using the broken hammer proverbially? Like we're swinging it every day, but it's broken. It's got like this rubber head on it. We're not using it properly. And I think that even as you say that, it comes to, I think I'm broken at times and I don't even realize that I'm broken, and that that tool is not being used in the most effective and efficient way. I'm just kind of flailing around at some points. Carole, you do have a book. I'd love to have the link. We'll put it in the chats that we have. Can you just tell me a little bit about the book, and then we'll get closed out of here?
Relationship Road is a book I wrote when I went to therapy. I determined that I was only going to listen to and understand emotional health based on biblical principles, because sometimes they get wacky stuff going. At least I think it's wacky, and I wasn't going to go there. So as I went through my own healing process, I delved really deeply into the Bible to look for what God has to say about emotional health, and He has a
Mm,
lot to say about it. And so, Relationship Road is basically an understanding of how we grow up unhealthy and how we become healthy and have healthy relationships based on biblical principles.
mm, amen. I love that. Love the idea. Carole, I thank you for this time. I thank you for just the knowledge and the wisdom. So I know most of you guys out there in the construction world don't have a lot of time. So Carole and I could probably have this conversation for 5 straight hours, but we're just thankful for the opportunity. Carole, thank you. I'm going to be praying blessings over you. I pray for the construction industry. This is Hope for Hard Hats presented by Sharpesoft. We love you guys. We love the industry. And we thank you for the opportunity to serve.